Hi, my name is Ale, and in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to read a local JSON file and use its contents to display pins on a map using MapKit. I have a JSON file ready, so what I'm going to do is drag it into xcode so that it is copied over and bundled with my project. So I have this file called locations.json, and I'm going to drag it into my project and make sure that it will copy the items and press finish. So now let's open this JSON file and take a look at the structure. So the JSON dictionary has the key locations, which maps to a list of more dictionaries. Each of these dictionaries represents a city and contains 4 key value pairs. So each city has an ID, its name, and its latitude and longitude. Let's go to our content view file and write a function that will read the JSON file. Let's add first a structure to represent each of the locations. So we'll call this struct location. And this structure will be decodable, and it will also be identifiable. Now, each of our locations has 4 key value pairs, like we saw earlier. So we're going to add these. First, our ID, which is of type int, then the name, which is a string, then the latitude, which is a double, and finally the longitude, which is also a double. Perfect. Now we're going to add another structure that will represent all of the JSON response. So like we saw, the response has the key locations mapping to the list of locations. So let's add here struct JSON data, and the structure will be decodable. Now the JSON data has the locations key. So we'll add let locations. And this is just a list of location that we just defined. Perfect. So now what we'll do is in our content view structure, we're going to add a method that will read this JSON file and will decode its contents to create a JSON data object. So let's add a method called readFile, private func read file. And the first thing we have to do is get a URL that will map to our JSON file. So let's add if let URL be equal to bundle.main.url for resource. The resource is locations, and the extension in our case is JSON. So if we're able to get this URL, then what we're going to do is try to read the contents. So we're going to create a data object. So let's add here, let data be equal to try question mark data contents of URL. So if we're able to get the URL and then we're also able to read the data, then what we'll do is try to decode it so that it's created in this JSON data format using our structures. So let's create here a JSON decoder. Let decoder be equal to JSON decoder. And what we're going to try and do is get the locations. So let's add if let JSON data be equal to try question mark decoder dot decode, and we're going to decode our data into the JSON data type. So we add here JSON data dot self from the data that we just obtained. So if we're able to decode the contents of our JSON file, then what we're going to do for now is just print the locations to the console so that we can see if we're able to get the list of locations. So let's add here a print statement, and we're going to print JSON data dot locations. Perfect. So now we have our method that will read the JSON file, but we actually have to call it so that we're able to read the file and print its contents. So in our content view, let's add under this padding modifier, we'll add the onAppear modifier. And for the perform parameter, we're going to perform the method read file. Great, so let's go ahead and run our app and see if we're able to print the list of locations. Great, so we see our app and here we only have the text hello world, but if we go back to Xcode and we expand the console here, we see that we're able to see the list of locations from our JSON file, and each location has an ID, a name, a latitude, and a longitude. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this content to show a map in our application that will show a star for each of our locations. So let's go back to Xcode, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a state variable that will hold the locations. So it will be a list of locations. At state private var locations, which is of type array of location, and initially it will just be an empty list. And now what we're going to do is modify our read file method so that instead of printing the locations, we will update our locations variable. So we can do self.locations is equal to JSON data.locations. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and add our map and add the annotations to show each of these cities. So to use a map, we have to import MapKit. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this text and this padding, and we're going to add the map. So let's delete this and let's add a map. And we can see there are different initializers. We're going to use this initializer that has a coordinate region, annotation items, and annotation content. So let's select this one. And as you can see, the first parameter is a binding to a coordinate region. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a coordinate region using the state property wrapper. So let's add here at state private var coordinate region is equal to mk coordinate region. As you can see, the coordinate region has two parameters, the center and the span. So let's add first the center, and this is a CL location coordinate 2D object. So I'm going to create here a CL location coordinate 2D. And to create it, we need a latitude and a longitude. I'm going to use 19.43 as the latitude, and then I'm going to use negative 99.13 as the longitude. Now for the span, we have to create an MK coordinate span object. So let's create one. And we need to provide a latitude delta and a longitude delta, and I'm going to use 50 for both of these values. Great, so now that we have our coordinate region, then we can pass it to our map, and since it's a binding, we have to use the $sign coordinate region. Now for the annotation items, we're going to provide a list or a collection that will represent these annotation items. And in our case, this is our locations. And finally, we need to provide the annotation content. So for the annotation content, we're going to use the map annotation object. So let's add here. Okay, so for each of the items in our locations list, we're going to get an object, and we can call this location in. And for each location, we're going to create the map annotation. So let's add here map annotation. And the map annotation needs a coordinate and a content. So we're going to create the CL location coordinate from the location object, location dot latitude, and location dot longitude. And finally, for the content of our map annotation, we're going to use a vertical stack that will show first the text, including the name of the city, and then an image of a star. So let's get rid of this. And let's add here a vstack. So first we're going to add the name, text, location dot name, and the text will have the font caption 2, and it will also be bold. Now after the text, we're going to add the image of the star. So let's see. Let's add here image, system name, and the name is star.fill. And we're going to give the image a font of title 2. We're going to change its color using foreground color, and we're going to use red. And we're also going to add a slight shadow behind this star, so we can use the shadow modifier with a radius of 1. Great, so now instead of showing the text that said hello world that we had before, we're going to show a map, and the map will show each of our locations. And for each location, it will add an annotation that includes this vertical stack, which includes the text with the name and the image of a star. And as you can see, we still have the onAppear modifier below our map to make sure that when our map appears, we run the method readFile, which will read our JSON file and update our list of locations. So basically, when our list of locations is updated, then our map will be updated to show the little annotations on the map. So let's go ahead and run our app again. Great, so as you can see, we now have the map that shows stars for each of the cities that we have in our JSON file. So you can see here I have two stars, and then we can move around the map, and we can see I have other stars here, one for Tokyo, one for Hong Kong, and I have some here as well. Great. So that's all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. If you want to learn more about iOS development with Swift and SwiftUI, make sure to subscribe to my channel, as I'll be posting new videos very soon.